I see millions of people out there who are being told every single day by all of our institutions that they should march down that road. And that road is actually the road to depression and loneliness and disconnection and a burning planet and a terrible community system. And I want to be the person holding a sign saying there's another road you can go down.
Hi there, I'm Bex Craig and you're listening to the Not Just Anything podcast for women who want it whole. I hope you'll join me each week as we hear real stories from real women about how they've curated a whole life by design rather than by default. And I am literally bursting for you to hear today's guest, Stephanie Harrison. Stephanie is the founder and CEO of The New Happy, which is a platform designed to help people redefine happiness. After a very impressive corporate career at many well-known organizations and armed with a master's in positive psychology, Stephanie looked around and felt so strongly that our society had happiness all wrong, and she felt an urge to do something about it. I cannot tell you how moved I was by our conversation and Stephanie's seemingly effortless articulation of something that matters so much to so many. She was so brilliant that we had an almost impossible task to cut this down to the length that we usually share. So I hope you'll forgive us for this slightly longer episode, but I'm sure you'll agree with me after listening that it was totally worth it. So here we go. Huge warm welcome to Stephanie Harrison, who's joining me today from the US. It is such a true privilege to have you on today's show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this conversation because I'm so inspired by the journey that you've been on and the business that you've created and the person that you are. And so I think I always like to start by having you kind of share who it is that you are in all the many facets that make up you. So big question to start with, but who are you?
I love the question. I think that if I had to describe myself, I would say that I am defined by my belief in the goodness of human beings and in the qualities that we can bring out in ourselves. And that belief is the thing that I hold most dear and that I have attempted to structure my life around and that I try also to live by every day. And so when I think about who I am, that is kind of at the heart of it, with the heart of the wheel, with the spokes coming off in terms of my relationships and my daily activities and my work and my causes that are important to me. They all stem from the fact that I just truly believe that within each of us, we have the potential for unlimited love and compassion and empathy and understanding. And when we tap into that, we are able to be our best and we're able to help other people to be their best. And that belief is the thing that, gets me up in the morning and the thing that also holds me close at night when I'm having a hard time. And it's something that I treasure, more than anything, as like a part of who I am.
It's such a perfect place to start. And I've got chills as you're talking because it radiates out from you that sense of, wow, there's a limitless potential in the world. And so it sounds as though this is something that really tugs at your heart and pulls you forward. And so how has that guided your story to where you are today?
That's a great question. I think that I've noticed in myself and in other people that we do have, I love how you describe it, like a tug, because I believe that's real. Like there is something inside of us, and some people call it a soul, some people reference your heart, some people say it's your programming. We all have our own ways of contextualizing it, but I think that there is something in each of us that we are meant to uncover and to explore and honor in our lifetime. And there are many ways in which we can take that, but ultimately I believe that when we start to listen to that, it takes us towards the work that we're supposed to do, the people we're supposed to be around. And I've really noticed this with seeing friends who have taken great leaps in their careers, like you leaving a big corporate job and going off to pursue your calling. Many of my other friends who've done that, they end up going on this amazing journey that is so uniquely them. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. And so I do believe in that tug. For me, this tug has manifested in my previous life, in my corporate work, was trying to figure out how we could make work better. So that was really my focus. It started for me actually when I was in high school. I ended up going on a service project to India where we worked at a leprosy mission for a month. And the ethos of the mission was that through meaningful work, you can reclaim your human dignity that might have been taken from you by the unfortunate, unfair, biased events that impacted these people suffering from leprosy, who had been cast out of their families, their villages, their communities. And through the process of doing work that was helping other people, they could rediscover who they were and that they mattered, that they had something that they could live for. And I was 16 when I went there, and this made an enormous impression on me. I mean, it was like the foundational event of my life. And after that, I decided that I felt as though, like a 16-year-old, like, well, we got to fix work. And so I went to NYU, and I ended up doing this program at NYU where you get to create your entire curriculum all around whatever you were interested in. So I ended up creating it around how to make work better. And then I went off and, worked at Deloitte and worked at LinkedIn and at Thrive, all with the purpose of trying to make work better. But along the way, I also discovered that there was something deeper I was interested in, which is really a problem that I see manifested so clearly in our Western societies, which is we have really lost our way in terms of what we value and how we achieve those values that we set out for ourselves. And I became really passionate about that and wanted to start to work towards it. And I ended up doing a master's degree, writing my thesis on this topic. And now I've founded a company devoted to trying to shift Western society's definition of happiness. Again, like another small problem that I'm interested in solving. All of that stems from the fact that, like, I believe that we've created a society that does not reward the pursuit of each person's individual tug. We have created a society that asks you to suppress that, to follow a specific norm that constrains you towards looking at these outward metrics of success. And unfortunately, these systems are amplifying problems that we have, like mental illness, burnout, all of the economic, racial inequalities that we experience. And I really believe, based on my research and the work that I'm doing, that this definition of happiness is something that is harming all of us. And if we can just recalibrate and figure out what it is inside of us is our unique goodness, and then find a way to live it, then we can start to write that in our own lives and inspire other people and work towards more systemic change.
Oof, it's a big one. And you can feel your passion as you're talking about it. It's just palpable. And so you touched on it a little bit there, but what are you taking a stand for, this sense of uniqueness? How does that look? What would that look like in your ideal setup?
So every person has a specific set of gifts, right? That they're born with and that are cultivated through their lifetime. And these are not like Excel or like, using being really good at writing memos, like these are broader than that. They're specific things that matter to you. So, as an example, I would say for me, something that matters to me is helping people to see the goodness inside of themselves and to see what is possible for them. And so that is something that like lights me up. It always has. And so the question for me in this new world that we're building is, how do I find a way to live that every day and to create a life that allows me to embody that more? And, I'm joking about the Excel bit because like there is a deeper gift underneath that, which might be analytical thinking or the ability to identify patterns from random data or to kind of come to meaningful conclusions. Like those are more like a gift level versus going a bit lower. Like that's kind of a skill. So if you think about a workplace, it's ideally it's conducive to that because there are different roles that require different skill sets. But instead, we've sort of taught people that there's this specific treadmill that they have to get on and stay on, that they have to be a certain way, that they don't get to honor those things. Or if they do, they have to hide it, or it has to be a side hustle or something like that. And I would love to build a world where every person gets to do the thing that brings them alive every single day. Because if they do that, and if they do that with a spirit of focusing on making the world better, using those gifts to help other people, then we will make our world a better place. Like that is the path both to individual happiness and to changing the world. And when I discovered this, I was like, it's so simple, it's so clear, and yet we are so far away from it. And we can fix this, which I think is really inspiring and empowering.
Yeah, it is really inspiring and it would make a huge change. And you said, when I discovered this, I'm just getting so curious. How did you discover this? Was it a big aha moment? Was it just over time? What was the catalyst in your own life that made you want to examine this?
I think for me, it was really like, in psychology, we call it me search. It's like, why something happened to me, I'm going to go study it. And a lot of psych students end up doing that. And so for me, it was a total me search problem because I was 22 and living in New York City. I had this beautiful apartment in Tribeca. I had this big fancy job that flew me all around every week, and it was everything I had worked my whole life for, and I was desperately miserable, absolutely miserable, and not just miserable at like at an emotional level, but at like a soul level, like not really recognizing who I was and what I was doing, and feeling completely disconnected from who I felt I was. And I know this is something that a lot of people feel because of their work and because of their life circumstances. And I was kind of like, what the hell? Like, I spent my whole life working to get here because I was told that this would be what made me happy. And I'm here and it's miserable. Like, why did this not work out? And I was frankly quite pissed because I thought that I was doing everything right. And, I subscribe to society's definition that if you do the thing and then do the next thing and then build off of that and then get the promotion and get the nice thing, blah, 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 you'll end up getting to the destination that is happiness. And, I got there and I was not happy with what I saw. And so anyways, I ended up moving out to San Francisco and starting to try and figure out some of these questions for myself. And about two years later, I ended up going to Penn to get my master's degree. And while I was there, I was studying positive psychology. And the interesting thing was, all of my classmates had these very specific things that they were interested in. And I was really coming at it from a philosophical perspective, I would say. Like, my question that I came in interested in is like, why is this happening? And am I alone? Or what does the research say about this? And so I ended up taking that really broad view in the work that I was doing. And I ended up writing this 300-page philosophy document of why Western society happiness is so broken and what I would recommend to fix it. And that was the result of analyzing over 300 studies and every wisdom tradition and interviews with people and integrating it all into this, like, basically very dense, very unreadable piece of work. And so it wasn't really an aha moment. It was a build of multiple years of thinking about it. And then in the 5 years since I graduated, I've just been thinking about it more and more and more and building up more, more data and trying to understand it more and more, and noticing it reappear again and again in my own life, in the lives of people I know, in society. And it's been a really interesting process and journey to kind of reflect upon.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it's funny because as you were talking, I was like, oh yeah, so she has this tug to her heart. And then 300 pages later, taking in all of the information, which I think just obviously speaks to your passion, but also your work ethic when you think about really wanting to get to grips with a topic. But then there is a bit of a step then, or some would describe it as a leap between saying, I've done all this research. I've really examined everything that exists. And as you said, you touched on sort of studies and wisdom theories and all sorts of things, and making the bold leap to setting up your own business to, take this even further. So how did you build that bridge?
That is a great question. And it was just to be really clear, it did not happen overnight. It took a very long time. Yes. So I did my master's degree and I wrote this brick, and then I basically put it aside and said, I have no idea what to do with this, and I don't think anyone is going to care. To be honest, that's kind of where I left it when I was graduated. And I was working at LinkedIn at the time. I had spent a year in a really demanding role at LinkedIn while simultaneously doing 40 hours a week of school, flying across the country every 3.5 weeks. So I was kind of exhausted and just thought okay, I'm going to just take a little break for, a couple months and see where I net out. And a couple months stretched on for longer than a couple months. And I ended up deciding ultimately that I wanted to do something about it. And the reason that it happened was because I ended up switching roles at LinkedIn, moving on to the product marketing team. And we were working on this really big launch. It was very exciting. And then my boyfriend, Alex, got sick. And I found myself after around 6 or 7 months of just only taking care of him and going to work, basically, and really not honoring this stuff that is really, really important to me and that I'd kind of been ignoring for a couple years at this point. And I didn't know what to do because I had really very little free time with those responsibilities. I was totally overwhelmed. I had no idea how to start it because I didn't know what I wanted. I had this really big document that no one was ever going to read. And I had no idea how I was going to make money off of it or if people even cared. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just do the thing that I know I like to do, which is to write. And so I'll start a newsletter. And so I started the New Happy as a newsletter back in 2018. And I just wrote a newsletter every week. And, some weeks it was the only time I had for myself I used to write that. And it reconnected me back to this topic, which was so important to me, which I had put aside for these other challenges and opportunities in my life. So I wrote that. And in the meanwhile, I ended up getting a job at Thrive, where I was in charge of all of our learning and curriculum, building out all of these science-backed experiences using all of my skills. And that was very, very immersive. And so I, again, just kind of kept up writing the newsletter. And then ultimately what happened was when the pandemic started, I recognized after a couple months that I was never going to be 100% comfortable making the leap out of my state of comfort, out of working for someone else. And I think that if you surveyed any of my friends, they would tell you that I'm a very hard worker, as you mentioned. Like I will work incredibly hard, to my detriment many times, but I also just really needed to take some time to focus on just one thing. And I felt like I couldn't do both of those things anymore, as well as take care of Alex. And when the pandemic happened, it just made me realize like there's no time that this is going to be right. There's nothing I'm waiting for that needs to be waited for. I care about this so much, and I believe that it could really help people, and especially with the challenges that people were going through, with their mental health and their well-being. I just felt as though it was the moment that I needed to start really focusing on it. And so ultimately that's what inspired me to make the leap, was a combination of both, like, interestingly, the constraints that I was under, but also the opportunities and the challenges of the moment.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think that so often when people look outside in at somebody that has set up their business, especially if someone were to look at your business now, because it is incredibly polished, you're a very smart cookie, and the stuff that you share is so insightful, and I absolutely love. I'm an obsessive reader of your content, and so from the outside looking in, you know, it can look like, oh well, yeah, it's logical. She's done all these amazing things, and then all of a sudden here's a business, and yeah, that totally makes sense to set it up in the middle of a pandemic because mental illness. But actually, as you're describing, there is never a good time. It is overwhelming. It is a big step out of your comfort zone. So like how do you sort of spur yourself out of that comfort zone? Like what do you do, like in real terms, to get to that place?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm so glad you bring up the first point you made, because it's so easy to look at somebody else's life and just connect the dots and not see that the dots are really
blood,
just like
sweat, and tears,
like massive dips in between the dots, which is how it was for me. And I'm so glad that you have this podcast and the work that you do, because we need to demystify that. We need to make it okay to talk about what those dips look like. And if the dips last for like years, because it did for me, like literally the space between those dots was multiple years, it has to be okay to talk about that. I felt like a massive failure, and you know, still struggle with that. And you know, there's no one I know who doesn't feel that way.
How do we start to, and maybe this is something that you speak to your audience about, or that you're working on, but for people that do feel like if they're not forging a path that is expected or you know, or glamorized, like some of the guests previously on my podcast said, you know, when they moved out of a very senior corporate role and set up their own business, like there was a loss of ego for them, but also people weren't that interested, because it's like, oh, well, we only know that those VP roles are really successful. Therefore, you know, you're really successful. And now it's like, what is she doing? So how do we start to get more comfortable with our own forged path being not a failure, even if we're having these dips that you mentioned, because we certainly do.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think that, you know, I think there's two big components that I like to call out here. I think the first one is related to what we spoke about, which is you have to have that burning gift inside of you, because that's what sustains you through the hard times. You know, I can guarantee that there is no entrepreneur who is going to be truly successful following somebody else's idea or trying to copy somebody else's playbook, because it's just too hard. Like you and I both know that it's you can't sustain yourself through the challenges of entrepreneurship without that thing inside of you that's just like dying to be birthed and that needs to be expressed. And so I think the first part is knowing that if you are going to follow your heart and discover your gifts and share them with the world, you have to have that as the centerpiece of what you do. Like the work has to be a reward in and of itself. And when you attach the externals that we tend to use as the validation of success, that's when we get into problems. And so like you're talking about like corporate identity being like, oh, I'm this big fancy director at LinkedIn, and like that's where I get my power. That's where you're vulnerable. That's where things can really hurt you, because what if that goes away? And what if you are no longer able to do that because we're in the middle of a pandemic and you have 4 kids at home and you can't do both at the same time, right? Like those things, we can't base our value off of them. And when we do that, we're aiming at the outcome rather than at the gift. So if you're a director at LinkedIn, then presumably there are things that you're doing that you're really great at and that perhaps are your gifts, and that's what you anchor on. The second piece is that you have to be doing good for other people. There is no way, I am fundamentally convinced of this from everything I know from my own life, from the literature, from all the case studies I've done. There is no way to live a good life where you are not serving other people in some way. And if you are principally focused on serving your own self and your own needs, you will never, ever be lastingly happy. And if we forget that, because we know it, we all know it, it's ingrained in us. If we forget that, or if we unlearn it, or if we listen to society's messages to focus exclusively on our own needs, then we end up in really big trouble. And we end up disconnected from ourselves, from other people, from our communities, from the planet. And so those are kind of like the main pillars. And so what I advise people to do is like first to discover your gift, right? Figure out what it is and to start taking baby steps towards it. Again, baby steps, most important thing. Like it's not going to happen overnight. The second is to slowly practice divorcing yourself from the outcomes that you have been rewarded with, that have been dangled in front of you for your entire life as validation for your existence, and start to rewire your brain to focus on the internal stuff. And then 3, paradoxically, stop focusing so much on yourself and start focusing on other people, because when you do that, you will be able to find fulfillment and you will be making the world a better place at the same time.
So simple, sounds so simple. And also we sing from the same song sheet, because this is really the mission that I'm also on when I'm talking to individuals. It's like you need to spend some time understanding yourself. And to me, what I love that you're talking about, which is the premise behind this podcast, is we are not the roles that we play. We're not a director at LinkedIn. We're not a CEO founder of a business. Like that is a role that we play, but they are part of who we are. Then there are other things you talk about, lighting up and the gifts and the uniqueness that sits at our core, and that comprises of many, many, many different things. What, like, who's the person behind this business? What else is going on in your life that you're managing, that you're supporting yourself and bolstering yourself around in the background?
I think that for me, I would say that there are certain things in my life that have made this moment possible, even though they've been objectively quite challenging. And then there are also certain things that are really sustaining, that are really important to me, that like help to ground me and to kind of connect me to that authentic self that you were mentioning. So I would say that I think it's really important, going back to the topic of taking care of yourself. Again, it's about, what do I need to be able to serve the world? Like that's the kind of question that I have oriented myself around for taking care of myself. And for me, that really is a lot about, I guess, movement and exercise, as well as creativity. So being able to engage in those pursuits for me, and again, we're all very different and have our own pathways, but when I am either moving my body physically or creating something, whether it's like writing or drawing or anything like that, I feel tapped into my true self. And it's like being connected to a battery. Like, it reboots me and gives me that feeling of like, oh, I'm at home in myself. And so finding ways to practice those, and to, again, one of the luxuries of being an entrepreneur and being in charge of my own time is that I can really work to prioritize those. And part of the journey I've been on for the last few months of being on my own in this way has been learning that actually they're non-negotiable, because I am my business. And so if I'm not aligned to me, then we have a problem. And so everything I do has to be kind of coming from that place of authenticity. And so that's kind of what I find grounds me in who I am and allows me to explore what that means to me. And again, it's taken different forms at different times in my life. I was really passionate about meditation for a long time. I love to read. Like, there are lots of different things that you can do to tap into that. And then the second is that in addition, I also have a very big role, as you would say, as a caregiver for my partner, Alex, who's been ill for 3 years and who requires very extensive support. And I do that completely on my own. I don't have any additional resources. And it's been a massive challenge, the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And it has also taught me the most of anything I've ever gone through about love and service and growth and forgiveness, and what it means to really be there with somebody through pain and my own inadequacies and the places that are hard for me to show up, and how then practically, like, how to balance having to take care of somebody in this way while also being there for myself and being there for my work and the other parts of my life. And that has been a incredibly, incredibly hard and also an incredibly, incredibly beautiful experience in the way that I would never wish it for myself or for anyone else, but that I am determined to extract the joy and the learning and the potential that comes from it and from navigating that.
Thank you for your vulnerability to share that. And I'm sure that I mean, I as you're talking, I sense the pride and also and the pain of seeing somebody that you love go through something that is difficult. And so many women play this role of carer. So many of us, whether we're moms, whether we're looking after aging parents, whether we are, seeing our partner go through something. And as you mentioned, it is both, beautiful and challenging at the same time, I can imagine. We talk a lot on this show about balance. I have a strong perspective on it, but what does that mean for you in terms of kind of some of the ways that you think about how you quote unquote balance, or how you harmonize the things that you're doing in your life?
It's a process. I mean, I wish I had it figured out. All I can say is that after 3 years, I certainly do not, and have multiple days a week where I have breakdowns and feel overwhelmed and start spiraling and have to, bring myself back down to earth. I think for me, the way that I've found to cope and to manage is figuring out how to come back to the core of it, like the core of what matters to me. And the thing that matters to me is that I am showing up and being there in service. And the world has given me this opportunity to do that for Alex in a way that I never expected. And the thing that really is so important that I wish I could help people understand more is that this will be you someday. Like, none of us really are going to go through life without being a caregiver or being cared for. It is a fundamental aspect of the human condition. If you think about the fact that we were all babies, we were all cared for, and somebody was there for us, taking care of our every need. And at some point in our lives, the statistics show that we're going to need that again. And nothing else matters except for the fact that you have somebody there for you who's willing to be there for you, and hopefully a community around you to help. And everything else kind of fades away. And so in this very ironic sense, Alex's illness has forced me to confront many of my old happy beliefs about success and what I'm supposed to be doing, and instead to really embody this thing, and walk the talk, practice what I preach, which is that the only thing that matters is being there for people and helping in some small way. And there's no balance in that. And I've just learned I'm learning, have not learned. I am learning to accept that, and to say that to myself, that as long as I can go back to that main goal, that's what matters most. And some days that means that I don't do much for myself, and some days it means that I get a lot of time to do things for myself. And also I have the privilege of having the person I care for be the person I love the most in the world, who is my best friend and who gives me back far more than I give to him. And so focusing on that is really the sustaining element. And then also like the surrender of just letting go of what I think something should be. Because when you're 28 and your partner gets sick and you end up having to give up everything that you thought your life was going to look like, you have to just let go, because there's no other choice. And so I think that it's just the dance, and like the coming back to the core and letting go of what you think you should do or be, and just being who you are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, letting go of the shoulds, it just speaks so much to my heart. And I think also what you touched on there so powerfully and so courageously is the kind of the journeys, the grieving processes that we all have to walk through in life when things don't play out the way that we expect. And you described it as a dance. And sometimes we're in control, or we have the impression that we're in control, and more often than not, we are following. And so that dance is present, right?
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I think you really point out something really important, which is that when your life is going well, you have the illusion that you're in control of everything and that it's all going well because you're pulling the strings. And then when your life is not going well, you realize that you have very limited control and it was mostly an illusion. And your area of focus on what you can control becomes very clearly defined. And the rest is something that you just like have to practice letting go of. And, when I say let go, I mean, like letting go is a process that happens hourly for me, like it is not something where I'm like, oh, like
it's not a destination.
Yeah. Like wash my hands of this. Like I'm good. No more feeling like I need to be this way. It's more like every time I notice the thought, every time it crops up, it's again like, oh, hello friend, like gotta deal with you again. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. Thank you so much for saying that, because it's true. And it doesn't matter what that voice is telling us, but as you say, hello, old friend, I know this voice. I know this one. I'm going to hear you and then let it go. But it is about noticing that and about letting these things pass. There's this rhetoric at the moment about, self-care and self-compassion. I don't know. How do you think about that? Is that something that you talk to people about, or?
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring that up. This is like a particular thing for me where I just feel like we've really gotten lost on the whole self-care narrative. We have held up the idea of self-care as the goal now. The reason that we are doing that is because we live in a fundamentally flawed society that tells us to sacrifice ourselves at every cost for achieving these old happy milestones. And so, we have tried to correct that, but we have unfortunately upheld the wrong thing. So, meditating and going for walks is not going to fix our institutions that tell us that we need to be promoted in 18 months or we're going to get fired, right? Like it does not fix the fact that we are living in a fundamentally unequal, unjust world. It does not fix the fact that certain people do not have the freedom to pursue their gifts because they're not able to access affordable education, right? So self-care is important, of course, but we have like lifted it up as the point of it all, when really self-care is the underpinning of the work that we do. And I use work more broadly than your job or your career. It's who you are and how you show up in the world. It is the thing that allows you to do that. And so when I talk about finding your new happy, which is discovering your gifts and using them to make the world a better place, self-care underpins that, because you have to be able to sustain yourself to keep going to making the world better. But we haven't been having this more nuanced conversation around why need to take care of ourselves. And without that, we're missing a fundamentally important piece of the puzzle. We'll never be able to find true fulfillment by just taking care of ourselves in a broken world. We have to come together to fix the broken world. And that's where the meaning and the purpose come from.
Yes, 100%. It's like slapping a Band-Aid on a broken arm, isn't it? It's, a bubble bath is not going to fix if you're not taking the time to really look within and to understand what you are and what, you talk about both what pulls you, but also the needs and the things that you want to rise to meet in the world, that you are compelled to do something about.
Yeah. I mean, I think like one thing I come across constantly with people who are, in our new happy community is this misconception that you find your purpose by going within. And that's where it kind of gets a little complicated because, I describe it as the tug, but the tug comes from outside of you. Like, you are never going to find your purpose by sitting at home and journaling about what you want to do. Like, you have to find it by helping other people. And so the question that I always tell people to ask themselves is, what problem in the world is very upsetting to me? What challenges can I help to fix in some small way? Who out there needs help? And what can I do to help them? And we have, again, because a lot of this old happy stuff is all centered around the self and what the self wants, we have to let go of that idea and we have to look outward and say, it's not about the self, actually. It's about what other people or what the planet or this community or this cause need from me. And so, for me, the problem that like I want to solve is the fact that I see millions of people out there who are being told every single day by all of our institutions that they should march down that road. And that road is actually the road to depression and loneliness and disconnection and a burning planet and a terrible community system. And I want to like be the person holding a sign saying like, there's another road you can go down. And that's a problem that I want to help fix. And like in your case, you see these people and especially these women who are put in these absolutely untenable situations and who are forced to suppress their true gifts and what they really want and fit these horrible norms that we box women into. And you're holding a sign that says like, I can help you find a better way, right? Like, so the question is, what sign are you going to hold? Like, what shovel are you going to grab? It's not about you. It's about what you do for other people. And if we can just wrap our heads around that and start to practice that, that's going to lead to such a fundamental transformation, not only in your life, but in the lives of the people who benefit from you. And how great is that? Don't we all want to be useful?
Oh, big time. I mean, goosebumps all over my body. Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, the ripple effect here, it's not just your life. It's not just the lives of the people around you. It's the lives of generations also to come. Because when we do this for ourselves, we make it okay for other people to do it. You are doing this. What you are doing now inspires other people to know that they can.
Yeah.
That they can hold that sign. And that's what's powerful about it.
Yeah. It's, the only reason I feel brave enough to step out is because I've seen other people do it, and I see you as a massive inspiration of that, like the courage that it took for you to walk off that walk off that well-trodden path, and to be doing this is tremendous, and it's so inspiring. We are able to leave trails that we never know matter to people, I think.
And for people that are listening, because I hear this all the time, and we know how we were, and we know people in our lives for whom this just feels completely inaccessible. It feels like what we're talking about here is like moving to Mars, and because of how we are taught, because of I just love so much of what you're talking about here. But a lot of this is, you talk about the institutions as conditionings. We are products both of how we are wired and born, and our brains, but also the set of circumstances, our experiences, and what we've been taught and learnt from years. For people that are like that, because I imagine you've got them in your community as well as I have them in mine, what's the piece that's missing? How do we tell them, come and stand and hold a sign, take a stand? What is the gap here?
I think for some people it's permission. So giving yourselves that permission. I think that's why often you see people massively change their life after they've been through a major setback, or an illness, or a divorce, or a challenge, because they have that, water bucket thrown on their head and realize that nothing is for granted. And, sometimes realizing you only have one life is a powerful motivator. So I think some people it's giving themselves permission. Some people it's fear, which is, I think rooted in, again, that conditioning, especially for women, that we have to be perfect. I think that this is something that I personally fight every single day of my life, the social conditioning that I need to be absolutely perfect. And I have my moments of telling myself that I'm such a failure because I haven't built $1 million business in 4 months, whatever the story is that I'm telling myself in that moment. So again, I'd label that as an old happy story and say, I'm done with that. Thanks for being here. Not interested. So again, kind of pinpointing what fear looks like to you and how to address it. I think that fear responds to gentleness, in my experience. That's, I think, why I took it. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier, it's you got to take it slow sometimes. I wasn't just going to quit my job at LinkedIn and go do this full time. It took me 2.5, 3 years to get up the courage to do that, including being in a role at Thrive as a leader where I was doing, similar work and learning some of the ropes there, things that I didn't know before. So I think taking your time and not judging yourself for, needing it to be perfect again right away, or complete or done. I think another gap is that people are asking themselves the wrong questions. And I mentioned this already, but I really see it, again, it's asking what they're focusing on the outcome of, what it is that they want, rather than focusing on how they can impact people. And then the final bit here, I think, is something that needs to be said, which is that there are some people for whom this is not possible because they have very real responsibilities in their lives, because they have been challenged and unsupported by the systems in which they were embedded against their will. And they do, sometimes they have to focus on things like putting food on the table or taking care of their kids or whatever it is. And in those cases, those are the people who deserve this the most. And again, it's why I try to focus my work on people who are privileged. I am trying to speak to people with privilege, because it is the people with the privilege who have to do the work to give the opportunities and the space and the support to rebuild our institutions so that those people no longer suffer as much as they are right now. And it's completely unfair to tell somebody who's a single parent working 3 jobs in a pandemic that they need to follow their bliss, or like they need to figure out what they're passionate about. It's completely impossible when you are trying to survive, or it's nearly impossible when you're just trying to survive. And I think that we owe those people. It's our job to find a way to support them and help them and to change these systems so that they can be better, so that less people are surviving and have the space to pursue the things that matter to them. Because it breaks my heart to think about the literal billions of gifts out there that will never be known because of the unfair circumstances that people are born into or find themselves in. And again, when I think about the people who I'm trying to reach the people who are not in those positions to do something about those situations.
Yeah, it's so moving and it's so true. And you know, when you talk about wanting to reach into the parts of the system that have a responsibility, you know, there's that saying, for whom much has been given, much is expected. I totally subscribe to that. You know, there is a responsibility. There is, you know, as you say, yeah, okay, let's think about what you want and your purpose. But the purpose that we all exist is also a purpose around humanity. And our humanity, our systems are not working. We're seeing that. COVID has, I think, in so many ways, shone a pretty big light. It's always been there. It's not like it's unearthed new things, but it is like pointing in some pretty clear areas where we have created this. We are complicit in building it. And so, you know, I love that idea that I'm being very targeted and direct about what the people that can do something need to do, as you say, to unlock the potential in the billions of people for whom the system is not well set up for.
Yeah. I love that quote that you shared. It's so perfect. I think, you know, and again, it's just a tiny like pivot. We're just getting it so wrong. It's like there was this article in the New York Times a couple years ago, which was called "Why Are People Successful, Wealthy, and Miserable?" When it came out, I was so excited because I was like, oh gosh, like people are interested in this thing that I'm really weirdly excited about and passionate about too. Unfortunately, like the discourse didn't really go anywhere after that, but we'll work on it. But in the article, he talks about this guy who is, you know, some hedge fund manager or something in New York, and he makes $1.2 million a year, and he's absolutely miserable. You know, he had this great life, went to Harvard, he has children, he has a wife. There is nothing wrong in his life. In fact, you could say he is probably one of like the luckiest human beings on the planet, and he's totally miserable. And the guy was excoriated online for acknowledging it. But like, if we go a little bit deeper and ask like, why is this person so miserable? Well, it's because he's been told the wrong things his entire life. Like, he's sitting there now in his penthouse apartment in Manhattan going, why am I unhappy? I have everything I'm supposed to have. I've worked so hard, you know, etc. And it's because he's not thinking. He's not asking himself the right question. He's not asking, what can I do to help other people? Because again, you're never, ever, ever going to find fulfillment in fulfilling your own needs. It's just not going to happen. And unfortunately, every person in our society has been told that. And there's this amazing quote. I think it's by Groucho Marx, but I can't remember. And it goes something like, being rich doesn't make you happy, but everyone wants to find out for themselves. And
right.
And it just sums it up so well. And I just think that I would love to save people the misery and just say right now, you know, well, how can I help someone? And again, it doesn't have to be big. It can just be really, really small, and you still get the same benefit. And if we can just start asking ourselves that question, we will be able to change the world for the better and to address those things that you mentioned, the issues that COVID has shown such a bright light upon.
Yeah, it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking it's such a cycle, isn't it? Because we're told that this is what we should aim for, so that's what we go after and pursue. Then we get there, and it's then we're told, oh no, actually, sorry, I mean, you need to go there and like start aiming higher and bigger and more money and bigger house and all of these things. And in the meantime, then you start the shame cycle of why am I not happy? And there's something wrong with me because I've got all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And as you say, just a simple reframe around what do I have that can be useful in this world? What do I have that could help somebody else? It's obviously a much more like humble reframe, but there's so much power in that.
I love the way you describe it. Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's as simple as that. And it's as complicated as that at the same time. But it's, right. It is really just a shift, and it will change your life if you let it.
And so, thank you. I mean, so many incredible ideas that you're sharing here, and I just think you've a way also of making it feel accessible and personal. And just, I guess, as we kind of wrap this conversation up, what's this future that you are holding assigned for yourself?
Oh, I love that question. Hope. Keep hoping. You know, I believe in hope, and I believe that hope happens when we work and when we give and when we serve. And for me, I mean, the hope sign has multiple meanings. You know, it's like hope for Alex that he'll find a cure and get better. Hope for us. Hope for a better future for our world. Hope for the goodness of our hearts to win out the battles that we all fight every day. Hope that we will create new and better systems and institutions that serve other people. And I hope that people discover within them the beauty that they have inside of them, and I hope that they use it and they honor it, because there's nothing more amazing than seeing that happen. And that hope keeps me going, and it's what inspires me too.
Oh, I feel very close to tears. So I'm going to say a huge thank you, because I think that's a perfect place for us to end. I hope a little bit more hope in the world, a little bit more authenticity, which you've touched on so many times, and a little bit more debunking of this old happy that we have cultivated in our lives, and leaning in a bit more to this new definition of happy. It's honestly, I'm so inspired by your story. I'm so grateful for you taking the time today and for your courage and vulnerability to share some of what you've learned along the way. So, Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was such an honor to talk, and I'm so grateful that your platform is focusing on making things better and helping to inspire the people who need to hear these important messages that you're sharing. So thank you for everything that you're doing. You inspire me to hope more.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Not Just Anything for Women Who Want It Whole. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to our weekly podcast and leave us a review. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here with us, and we look forward to having you join again. And remember, be brave, be whole, be you.